Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is 10 a.m. Welcome to the 18th day of the session, 2025, February the 6th, 68th Wyoming Legislature. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Convening roll call for the 18th day, February 6th, 2025. Alamand? Excused. Andrew? Angelos? Here. Banks? Excused. Bear? Here. Brady? Excused. Bratton? Excused. Brown, Gary? Here. Brown, Landon? Byron? Here. Campbell, Elisa? Here. Campbell, Kevin? Excuse. Chestick? Here. Clouston? Here. Connolly? Here. Davis? Excuse. Eklund? Excuse. Erickson? Here. Filer? Here. Geringer? Here. Guggenmoss? Here. Haroldson? Here. Harshman? Heiner? Here. Heft? Here. Jarvis? Here. Johnson? Excuse. Kelly? Here. Knapp? Here. Larson Lloyd? Here. Larson JT? Here. Lawley? Here. Lean? Here. Locke? Present. Lucas? Here. McCann? Here. Nicholas? Here. Ottman? Excused. Pendergraft? Here. Posey? Here. Provenza? Here. Riggins? Excused. Rodriguez Williams? Schmid? Excused. Sherwood? Here. Singh? Excused. Smith? Here. Storer? Excused. Strock? Stivar? Present. Tarver? Here. Thayer? Present. Washut? Here. Wasserberger? Here. Webb? Here. Weber? Here. Worf? Here. Williams? Here. Winter? Excuse. Wiley? Here. Yin? Here. Mr. Speaker. Here.
It appears we still have our Ag Committee out. They're on their way. Part of them are here, but there will be a few more members coming in, so we'll hold the roll open until that happens. Ladies and gentlemen, leading us in prayer today will be Pastor Marty Crump from Family Life Church, Gillette, Wyoming. And just as a side note, Pastor Crump is the father of Representative Angelos. So just for your own information. Thank you, Marty. Please lead us in prayer.
Mr. Speaker, House, thank you for the opportunity to do this. It is an honor. Would you pray with me? Father, your word tells us that by you all things were created in heaven and earth, all things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominion or rulers or authorities, all things were created through you and for you. In you we live and breathe and have our being. You hold everything together by the word of your power, and we are dependent on you for everything. Knowing that, Father, I pray over each and every heart and each and every man and woman in this chamber today, that you would move upon them, give them your peace, pray for their health, Father, as they have struggled this week and the past week. Just pray for healing, pray for their staff. And Father, I ask that you would give them wisdom and discernment in the bills that they pass and the things that they do. Thank you for their hearts to serve us, this great state of Wyoming. I just ask that, Father, you would bless their families and their businesses. Watch over them as they're here, separated from them. We'll give this to you, and we thank you. We pray, Father, for your kingdom to come and your will to be done this day on earth as it is in heaven. We will worship you. We will thank you. In the mighty name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Crump. Fellow members and guests, please join me in the salute to our flag. Hey, hang around here and say hi to these people. I want you to walk through. We're gonna be they're all gonna come up here and we're gonna shake hands. Yes, by all means, you guys seem to be recovering quite well. If you'd like to get out and play ball, shake other hands, please do. If not, it's good. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I see we've got our Ag Committee is starting to make their way in. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we can go ahead and find our seats. I see most of our members have made it into the chamber, so the chief clerk will finish out our roll call and we will get underway. And again, I am so thankful to see how many of you are doing so much better and you're here, and we appreciate your presence and are thankful that you've recovered or are in the middle of the recovery, and we look forward to everyone continuing to do that. So I do believe there's a privilege of the floor here. We'll hold on and get our roll call done, and then we'll do that and move on. Ladies and gentlemen, the chief clerk is trying to call the roll, so let's keep the chatter down so she can hear if people are here.
Allemand. Banks. Brady. Bratton. Campbell Kevin. Davis. Eklund. Johnson. Ottman. Schmid. Singh. Storr. Strzok. Winter. 61 present, 1 excused, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. Next, before we go to our Journal Committee report, privilege of the floor. Representative Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege.
Absolutely.
Good morning, everyone. Today I am very happy to introduce a very special guest of mine, a constituent from Sheridan, a 2023 We the People Sheridan High School state champion, a leukemia survivor, my campaign manager, and so lucky to look like her mother, not her father, my daughter, Lillian Rose, up in the North Gallery.
Good morning, Lily, and welcome to the house. Thank you for allowing us to enjoy your dad. He's a real blessing to us, and thank you for sharing him. Okay, Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of January 5th, 2025 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Posey and Jarvis.
Thank you, Reading Clerk. Our doctor of the day is Miss Terry Marceau, physician's assistant, and she will be here today and tomorrow, is my understanding. So if you guys are still feeling a little bit under the weather, we have a doctor on call here to be able to help you with those needs. So thank you for being with us, Dr. Marceau. Okay, we do not have any messages from the Senate, nor any, oh, Representative Angelos,
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
please.
Okay, I might get in trouble for this. So up in the gallery, and which one is this? North?
Representative Angelos, just for information's sake, if you ever ask yourself, should I do this? You probably shouldn't do it, but anyway, you go right ahead.
It's worth
that's
it.
fine.
It's worth it. Okay. So up in the North Gallery, and you can stand as my mom, Carrie. You met my dad. My mom, Carrie Crump. And then my two younger daughters, Sophie Angelos, who is a senior at Thunder Basin High School in Gillette, and Lily Angelos, who is a freshman at Thunder Basin High School, who is missing a basketball game to come and witness this today. So.
Thank you, ladies, for being with us today, and we do appreciate the influence of your family on the House, for your granddad to be able to pray for us today, and your mom and her influence here and her service to her district. And so thank you for being here, and enjoy the House. No reports from standing committees. No introductions. Man, we're making time. Bills on second reading.
House Bill 72, sponsored by Representative Lawley, Protecting Women's Privacy in Public Spaces Act, an act relating to the administration of government.
We have amendments. Representative Lawley. Second reading amendment number 1. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 72. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, by the way. This amendment is a result of really some conversations I had with representatives of our local governments, and they asked for a few adjustments in language that would help them and help them understand how to navigate this space. They resoundingly said we are supportive of this policy, and we just want to make sure that it's going to work. So what we've done here is let me just read you. This is a little bit harder to read, but this is what it will say now on page 7, line 21. After the word sex, it will say, reasonable steps may include, but is not limited to, posting appropriate signage and adopting policies for the enforcement of this provision of this act, provisions of this act. And then on page 8, line 6, it interjects a G, it's rewritten, and we strike the language, all civil actions initiated, subsection shall be brought no later than 2 years after the violation occurred. And then we include some new language where it will now read, a person aggrieved under this section who prevails in a cause of action brought under this section is entitled to actual damages and may cover reasonable attorney's fees and costs if the governmental entity operating the public facility in any amount not exceeding the damage award. So that, again, is a friendly amendment, and it really does help them have a better understanding of how to navigate this space. So I ask for your aye vote. Stand for questions, Mr.
Thank you, Representative Lawley. Any members for their first time want to speak on the amendment? Seeing none. Representative Lee, question being called. Members, you're being asked to make a decision on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 72. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. Thank you very much, Representative Lawley. Next amendment for our consideration, number 2 to House Bill 72. And that is, Representative Williams, I understand. If I can get all these pages open. Yes, sir, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 72. This amendment addresses concerns that rural jails had regarding staffing challenges. They also are in support of this legislation, and this amendment just helps them address small jails, short staff. And I'll look forward to the sponsor of this legislation and helping us understand it a little better, but I believe it's a friendly amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Lawley.
Thank you,
first
Mr.
time.
Speaker. Again, this is a friendly amendment and the result of conversations we've had with representatives of our sheriff's offices and to really look at particularly smaller counties who have very small facilities. And they emphasize, and I believe that they fully support the intent of this legislation, but they have what I would call some logistic issues that may come up. And what we've done in this language is simply accommodate their ability to navigate the space where they have limited space and they have populations that are changing often. So they don't have an actual permanent split of this many women, for example, this many men. So they're able to then make temporary assignments of areas and redo those assignments according to population and some other things about movement around in that jail facility that give them the flexibility that they can do their job and uphold the intent of this House Bill 72. So it is a friendly amendment. I urge your aye vote. And again, we have, I really actually want to just say it's been very good to work with these different representatives of different areas that this does impact, have their support for the bill, but help me understand some ways that we can navigate the space that deals with some real realities they deal with. So again, happy to have had those conversations, and I ask for your aye vote on this amendment.
Any other members for their first time? Seeing none? Question being called. Members, you're being asked to vote on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 72. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment has been adopted. Next amendment for our consideration, number 3 to House Bill 72, Representative Provenza. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can't tell if that's vampire voice or something else. Anyway, sorry. I move second reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 72. Members, what this amendment does is includes a thing that can't happen in restrooms, which is to try and protect our constituents from harassing another person in a changing area, restroom, or sleeping quarters, and throughout the bill. What this does is it just makes it, it ties it to the civil penalties that are tied in the rest of the bill. So it lists the things that can't happen, people can't do with restrooms. This is just another thing to try and protect people in our restrooms, including women. So I would ask for your favorable consideration on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any members for their first time? Representative Lawley for her first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, I urge you to resist this amendment, and for several reasons. Number one is these are all causes of action that already exist in the law, and it only muddles what we're trying to do here in a very clear fashion concerning what is that happens when someone goes into a restroom that is not of their sex from birth. And so some of these are even what are legal, or excuse me, criminal causes of action potentially. So the mixing of these is not necessary. This is not a needed amendment, and it actually could cloud the question. So I would just ask you to vote no on this amendment.
Any other members for their first time? First time? Back to the second time? Speak again? Back to the bringer. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is not criminal. This does not tie to any of our Title VI. It just adds protections for women and other people in bathrooms so that they are not harassed. One of the concerns that I have with this bill is now we're asking people in my community that they have to go into bathrooms that other folks might think that they don't fit in. I'm asking that we don't harass them, that we don't make threats towards them, that we don't make them feel afraid. And you'll see in this language, it says, the harasser knew or should have known would cause a reasonable person to suffer substantial fear for their safety or substantial emotional distress. I don't think any person should have to suffer substantial emotional distress or fear because they went into a bathroom. And now we're forcing people to use bathrooms that maybe that don't fit with them. And these are people in my community that work, that provide, that have families like yours, and have children like you, and they want to be able to use the restroom without having to worry about harassment and fear. That's all this amendment does, is protects people. People that don't conform to what your beliefs are about gender are still people, and they don't need to be subject to harassment. You can agree that maybe they should use a different bathroom and you can vote for this bill, but I would ask that you should also agree that they're not subject to harassment and violence. So please vote aye on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Members, you are voting on second reading amendment number.
You don't have to speak. I'm the bringer of the amendment.
Yep, no, once the bringer of the amendment is spoken, then we don't allow. Members, you're being asked to vote on second reading amendment number 3 on House Bill 72. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The amendment has not been adopted. Members, House Bill 72 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection. Oop. Oh, there's another one? Oh, sorry, got one coming in, coming off, hot off the presses. All right. Representative Nicholas, amendment number 4 to House Bill 72. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, you'll have to refresh to have this amendment in front of you. But the amendment's pretty simple. If you go to page 7, it talks about what some of the exceptions are. And this adds one more exception. And the exception is that for use of a multi-option changing areas and restrooms, sleeping quarters, and designed for the opposite sex when authorized by the public facility for temporary use by male or female groups and teams. So the purpose of this is, a lot of times, particularly in smaller schools, when you go to a basketball team, the men's use the women's locker rooms for their changing. And there's other types of situations where that can occur. So this just allows a little more freedom so that you can temporarily change a unisex into an opposite unisex. Or if, say, you have co-ed soccer teams that need to go in and change their shoes, there are ways that you can actually get it accomplished. So I'm in favor of the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Nicholas. Representative Lawley, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just having quickly read it and heard the explanation, I would tell you it's simply not necessary. On the educational space, on page 10, lines 11 through 13, there's already lines 15 through 21, ability to temporarily make some reassignments. It already exists in the educational space. So we talked about that the other day when the bill was presented. It seems like a long time ago, but we talked about the fact, for example, locker rooms or restrooms, they can temporarily take a men's locker room and make it into a women's locker room. So the flexibility is already in the bill to do that. And let me make sure I got the right place on it for the changes. Yep. Temporary use. I might not have gotten you the right place. A little more time would have been good. I didn't even read the amendment, so. It's in here. Yeah, I think I gave the right side on page 10, lines 15 through 21. So my point is it's already in the bill. This doesn't really add to that, and it's just not necessary. So I suggest you vote no on the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Any members for their first time? Any other members for their first time? Seeing none, second time? Speaking of the amendment? All right. Members, you're being asked to vote on second reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 72. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment has not been adopted. Having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration will be House Bill 202.
House Bill 202, sponsored by Representative Filer. Fast Track Permits Act, an act relating to city, county, and state and local powers.
Okay, we have amendments. House Bill 202, first amendment is from Campbell. Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading, First Amendment to House Bill 202.
Please.
Thank you, sir. Primarily, and I've talked with the bringer of the bill this morning, primarily the reason for this amendment is to bring to light concerns, not only from the district I represent, but from some of those other smaller counties. So you will see with this amendment, truly, it just is to bring to light these concerns and how they might be addressed. So with this amendment, you'll see on page 4, starting on line 7, we have this 60-day timeline, which requires a local entity to approve or deny, and there doesn't seem to be room for delays caused by the applicant, whether they're intentional or not. So including that language, actually that would be, I don't know where I'm at. On page 4, line 15, where we have the 10 days. This 10 day is a concern because we're dealing with other state and federal entities. And so holding the local authorities to that 10-day when there's so much outside of their control when you're dealing with the federal government. So we might end up putting some local authorities in a position where they're forced to deny a project just because they can't make those timelines. So extending that to 30 days gives them more time when they're dealing with those projects with the federal government. The other big one is going to be on, let's see, page 5, line 9. So part of this 10% coming back to the city on those missed requirements during the planning phase. The concern is with those rehabilitation of existing structures, because sometimes we don't run into things until we're in that demo phase. And so holding the cities and counties, accountable for things that could not have been foreseen seems a little unreasonable. So if you could help address that, that would be fantastic. The last thing that we have some challenges with line 5 or page 5, line 9, dealing with the automatic approval if timeframes are missed. With the community I represent, this will be a challenge and workable. Our concern, though, is with those smaller local municipalities that have, shortage in staffing levels and their ability to meet those arbitrary timelines. So some of them, our smaller communities with less staff may rely on the state to provide some of those inspections, and then it really does strip their authority away from regulating that development. So those were the concerns that were brought, and the reason for this amendment is to hopefully have some of those addressed. And I understand that the need to have, more accountability on our local level, and also giving them reasonable expectations so we can move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Filer, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know everybody got up this morning to talk about building permits. How much fun is that? But anyway, on and against this amendment, folks, I totally understand that the reason the bringer brought this, talking with her local municipality. But I think when we look at this, on this amendment where, you want to delete the 10 days and insert 30 days. Well, just something about that is the reason they want to delete that 10 to 30 days, there's already a provision in the bill that if it does go beyond, or if it's going to go beyond that 10 days, it's already specified in the bill on that page 4, right after 10 days, it says, unless the applicant and the local government entity agree in writing to an alternative deadline. So most likely what's going to happen is if it's maybe the state has to get involved with something, maybe it's a water issue, or the federal government have to get involved for some environmental issue, whatever that might be. But what it does is it makes it to where that municipality and that applicant actually have to talk to each other. Because what could happen right now without this is the municipality could just sit on it and not say anything. You as the applicant are just sitting there waiting for an answer and don't know anything. So what this does is it puts it into the municipality's hands to say, hey, we better contact the applicant. Let's have this meeting. Let's go through why, the state says this or the federal government says this on whatever the issue may be. But it gets them to actually sit down and talk. But it also says, agree in writing. So this is not a real big, hard thing to do because in the bill, in writing, you can actually do an electronic form. So they could send you an email. This is just an open line of communication between the applicant and the building department of that municipality. So I think, having the 10 days just says, hey, we got 10 days, we need to contact this applicant. It doesn't say that you're going to be done within this 10 days, and that's all you have. This opens it up to allow the municipality and the applicant to work together on a true deadline, a real definitive deadline. So that part of the amendment, I just can't agree with. The other part was, I believe, the delay. I think on page 5, line 9, it says, unless the missed requirements are a result of the unanticipated issue discovered during demolition, construction, and all that. So that is true. There's no doubts. Anybody that's worked construction, say you're flipping a house or bought a commercial building and you started tearing into it and something was totally not right. But that makes the applicant, that's part of the applicant's due diligence also, to work with that building department, have to change their permit because they're going to have to add something else or do something else. So I believe that this part here is actually pretty well unneeded and also specifies in the bill itself. What it does though too is holds the municipality accountable on their end along with the applicant. I know this is getting into the weeds of doing building permits, but at the end of the day, what we're saying in the amendment is you as the applicant are the only one that has to be held accountable, but not the municipality. So I think that, I think the way the bill is written right now actually helps both sides of that. The last part of that amendment, where on page 5, lines 13 through 16, where it wants to delete everything, delete that whole lines 13 through 16. If we delete that, it says, the bill says, except as provided in paragraph D and I on this section, if the local entity fails to comply with a deadline established under this subsection, the applicant's request shall be approved as submitted. So what that does is it tells the municipality that because the applicant did all their due diligence, they spent the money, they got their engineer drawings, they bought this property, they got contractors lined up, they're ready to go. They did everything they were supposed to do, but the municipality goes, I'm too busy today. walks away from it. Or that somebody in that planning department says, I really don't like that project, and walks away. What this does is it holds that municipality's feet to the fire to actually look at that applicant and get this thing moving forward, because to be honest, the municipality should not have so much control to where it takes away your property rights to be able to build something that's a permittable use on your own property. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I just resist the whole amendment as written and would like a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ocean, Andrew, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against, what this amendment does is completely remove any teeth that this bill had to begin with at all. If you don't like the bill, maybe just consider voting no on the bill, but I wouldn't amend it to do nothing. Thanks.
Any other representatives? Representative Larson Lloyd for his first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not not sure where I'm at on the amendment, but the amendment brought to light in the sponsor's conversation about being able to then, if the applicant and the agency agree, then it can go longer. But what if the applicant doesn't agree? Then the bill doesn't provide that I can see an avenue then to address that. And so if he could maybe on his second round here address how we get around that, I'd appreciate it.
Any other members for their first time? First time on the amendment? None? Second time? Representative Filer. We'll go to the bringer at the very end, so go ahead, Representative Filer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a great question. And I thought about that myself whenever I wrote this legislation. Most likely, if they all have to come together and they got to agree in writing a true deadline, usually means there's something in there that was probably not a permittable use or it turned into a conditional use. So what happens is they're going to have to agree upon it, and that's going to hold that municipality accountable to say, well, if we can't get you done, there's got to be a reason why, whether it's health and safety, whether it's, the soil issues, it could be a lot of different things. But then that gives that recourse for those ordinances, standards, land uses, all those different things that's already set by your municipalities to be able to say, this is why you can't, we need a little more time or whatever it might be. And I'm willing to bet there isn't a contractor, a homeowner, or anybody that would say, well, you're right, my building's probably going to sink. We might want to relook at this. So, but what it does is it keeps that line of communication, and we don't want to keep everything with the municipality. If we do, we're in the same situation we're at now. And what I want to say is this, came to me. There's a wonderful 5th generation rancher up in a county with these beautiful mountains, and it's northwest of here. 5th generation rancher who all he wanted to do was diversify his portfolio a little bit with his property. So what he did is he went through all the permitting processes, including a conditional use on his ag property to build a barn in order to host a couple weddings a year. He went through the whole process. And in that county, they said, yep, go build this barn. Go make some money, right? So he does. He goes and builds the barn to the specs that they approved. Calls for an inspection. The inspector comes out and says, we want you to build another roof on top of your roof, above and beyond what was already approved by engineers, by the building plans, and by what was approved by that municipality. Cost this rancher thousands of dollars and almost bankrupt the project. This is why we have to have things in place to keep our government and our local municipalities and building departments at the same checks and balances that we have to do as applicants. Right now, they have all the power. The applicant has none. We are at the whim of a municipality to tell you what you can and cannot do on your permittable uses of your own land. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would absolutely urge you to vote in favor of this amendment, and this is why. Ultimately, it's our cities and our counties that are responsible for this development and ensuring the public safety. So in terms of permitting, in terms of inspection, in terms of ultimately, it is going to be our municipalities and our counties that are responsible. So taking away their ability, their authority to do that effectively is counterproductive, especially when they're the ones that are ultimately responsible. So yes, does there need to be additional conversation between our contractors and our municipalities? Absolutely. But to take away authority from those that are ultimately responsible is not okay. So going back to the 10-day, the challenge I have with this on page 4, you'll see on line 5 with that 60-day, then it says unless they have agreed in writing to an extension. Cool. Then we have, if it deals with state or federal agency, that's where we have the 10-day. Well, now we're dealing with the feds and we're dealing with other state agencies. And as a municipality, I have to rely on the contractor to agree that I need an extension? What if they don't? Then I miss the timeline. So amending that to 30 days, which is reasonable, just gives our local municipalities and counties an extra 20 days to work this out with the feds, right? Which seems reasonable, because what happens if the contractor doesn't agree? If it were just a notification, I would be okay with that. We'll notify you that we're not going to be able to get this done in 10 days. That makes sense to me, but that agreement part puts us in a bind. The other part that really I would urge you to consider is on page 5 with that 10%. How it reads right now is that any requirements missed by a local government, 10% of the fees are going to be reduced. So that's a loss to our cities and counties because they missed something in the planning period. Well, we all know in those rehab and those reconstruction, there are a lot of unanticipated things that we don't discover until we get in there to do demo. So by putting in that little language, this comes, we missed it, it wasn't there, we didn't know about it until we demoed. Cool, we're not gonna hold you responsible for that 10% loss. So while this amendment, I don't think it takes any teeth out at all. It just says we're gonna help do right by our cities and our counties because ultimately they're responsible for the public safeties. So let's not put them in a bind. I would urge a yes on this amendment.
Members, you're voting on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 202. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for our consideration, Representative Baer, number 2 to House Bill 202. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 202 and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, this is a small amendment. It achieves 2 things. One is it clears up some language so that those people who do already comply with existing zoning, it just changes the terminology for those to by right, just to clean up there. And that's at the beginning and at the end of this amendment. But in the center is the heart of this amendment on line 21. It talks about changing this to 21 on the bill. It talks about changing this into more of a rifle shot than a shotgun approach. And so basically we are, in this amendment, removing the commercial properties from this bill. I think that the bill is timely and needed. But maybe going a little bit far. And I'll give you an example. In my community, we recently did some work on our hospital, and we're talking about a 1,400-page document that would have to be reviewed in 60 days. And my concern is that, one of the options for these government entities is to simply say, we're going to be fined if we don't get this done. It's easier to just deny this particular submittal. And rather than go down that path, I'd rather this bill be a little bit more of a rifle approach dealing with residential. And maybe we can come back later and get a little bit more language in on how we should do it on commercial.
Members for their first time, Representative Wasberger, for your first time.
Thank you, House Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the concerns I have with this amendment is excluding our commercial properties. I have a lady here in the city of Cheyenne that's trying to work on getting her laundromat opened up. And so by excluding our commercial properties, this would totally kill the purpose of why I was really excited about this bill. And so it's very interesting, you know, I appreciate the presenter of this amendment. And I mean, folks, for all of you know, I mean, I usually am very much in favor of a lot of things that's presented, but this is something that's going to exclude that small laundromat. One of the things that concerns me with it is a lot of your big companies, they can afford all these permitting, all this, you know, stuff, all these hurdles that they have to go through. But for that little small laundromat, for her to sit there and be 4 months behind of her initial data once she wanted to open up her business, I mean, for most people, that's going to put them in shambles. She's very fortunate about the, you know, the financial blessing that she had gotten to be able to afford to go through this. But someone like myself, I just simply could not afford to do that. So I'm going to ask you to vote no on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Andrew, Chairman Andrew, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against, I don't have a better example than that last one, but I agree that this is for small businesses. They can't cash flow waiting around on city governments this long. Thank you.
Any other members for their first time? Representative Storr, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for this amendment, the bringer of the bill and I had a conversation early in the session about this bill, and I think it's fair to say that much of his angst is directed at my county because we've had some really difficult few years in that when COVID hit, we suddenly had a proliferation of cranes. And I don't mean the sandhill cranes kind. I mean the ones that, you know, fly high in the sky, are made out of metal, and help with the construction of large buildings. As a result of that, our planning department really was stressed out, and I would be the first to tell you I would like to see some improvements in our planning department take place, and I hope my county commissioners can work on that. But this amendment really makes sense to me because, you know, commercial development is much more complex. It takes place over a much longer timeline. There's often additional regulations that apply. And to try to essentially hold the county hostage over a timeline that just doesn't make sense for those kind of developments, I just don't think makes sense. I actually brought a bill last session to bring the idea of development agreements to Wyoming. A number of those states have those. It's a voluntary agreement that a developer can enter into that allows you to kind of work together with your county or town to come up with a timeline, to make agreements on how this development is going to work forward. And that would make a whole lot more sense, I think, than trying to hold commercial developments to such a timeline as this. So I appreciate the bringer of the amendment. I think it makes sense. You know, I recognize residential. We do think that we can do better on moving permits forward. But I would also mention this, that, you know, while this might not apply in my county, we've also just passed a lot of bills that are going to impact.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Your point?
Can we just please stay on the amendment?
Representative, we are kind of getting into a little bit off here, so please do stay to the amendment, but continue.
Well, thank you, sir. I would just finish up by saying that revenues at the county level may be considerably reduced. That would make it harder for our counties to be able to implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other members for their first time? Representative Filer, do you want to wait or go on? Representative Thayer, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for this amendment. Probably after talking to our local official, on page 2, line 21, the deletion of change of permitted zoning use, is being sought because zoning and use issue changes must be resolved prior to the building permit being submitted, and the requirement change of use varies across the state. After talking to our local official staff of one, to meet these requirements is really tough. So again, that deletion is super important because then you go to page 3, line 4, and the word request. So it refers back to request. So on and for this amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Wiley, for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against the amendment, I believe this question of, moving out of residential, it's okay. We can have it, but we talk about efficiencies on this floor all the time. We talk about overspending. We talk about budgets that go over. This helps put skin in the game for everybody. This helps put checks and balances for everybody. Okay, you don't like the time frame that you have to go through the blueprint and the plans. All you have to do is give written notice, is what I read in this bill. You go back, you look through it, you look for efficiencies. This is above and beyond residential. This is us trying to grow as a state, and getting everybody involved and everybody cooperating together. Nothing wrong with that. On and against.
Thank you, Representative Wiley. Representative Filer, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just kind of on and against this amendment, but actually, Mr. Speaker, what I'd like to do is divide the amendment.
Okay, what is your division?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I would like Division 1 to be lines 4 and line 9. And then Division 2, I would like lines 6 and 7.
I would say yes, it is divisible. Which one do you want to go with first?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to deal with Division 1 and get that out of the way as quick as possible.
Okay, Division 1, please proceed.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on Division 1's, line 4 and line 9, where it, says by right, I agree with that. Because it's by right under permittable uses that it is by right. And I think that's a good legal term to put into both of those spots, and I'd ask for your aye vote.
Any members for their first time? First time, seeing none. Second time, back to the call for the question. Question being called. Members are being asked to decide on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 202, Division 1. Bear in mind, Division 1 is line 4 of the amendment and line 9. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Division 1 has been adopted. Division 2, Representative Filer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on Division 2, on and against Division 2, for a lot of the reasons that folks have already spoke about. But I want to kind of, with this, kind of give you an analogy. So if we revert everything back to just residential, it kind of takes the meat out of this. It doesn't, there's no help for that small commercial company that already has most likely a property that's already built, and maybe they're just changing the use, which is a permittable use. So like I think I spoke with this the last time on the committee of the whole, but so if you think about it, a permittable use would be if you had a cabinet shop, but now you're going to lease the building out to a welder. They're going to pull a permit because they're going to do some electrical work, things like that, to maybe change some things. But the permittable use should not have to go in for this huge scrutiny of public comment because it's already a permittable use in that zone, right? So if you think about it, it's kind of like permittable use is your puppies and your kittens over here in this column. They're about the same thing. Everybody loves them. Nice, soft, furry, not a big deal. Conditional uses and other things like that are over here in this column, and that'd be like your cougars and your bears. No offense to that, bears. But, that would be over here where it's got a lot more teeth into it, where you're talking data centers, something big and industrial. These things are conditional uses. So they have to go through. This bill does absolutely nothing to those. The process stays the same. There's no change. So when we talk about commercial, we're talking about permittable uses. The kittens and the puppies playing together. Everybody's okay with it. It's already permittable use. We're just changing the permittable use. That's it for that dwelling, but it's already permittable, right? So to take that out takes the meat out of it for any small commercial operation. So, so that's why I'm a firm believer that we need to defeat Division 2 of this amendment. And then, a lot of the other questions and concerns that got brought up with the bill, but I think we can move on to the bill after this amendment there, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Any members for their first time? Representative Clausen for his first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment, and a question to the bringer. The question being, is this a statewide issue? Is this affecting all of our communities? Or is this really a local issue that needs to be taken care of in one community? So again, I don't want to cause problems at other communities when maybe it's one or two communities that are having this issue. So again, is this a statewide issue, or is this more of one or two communities? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Yin, for your first time.
So, Mr. Speaker, I guess to use the dividers analogy, if we have a cougar and I'm trying to say I'm going to build a cougar, but I actually tell the department that I'm trying to build a kitten, but I'm actually trying to push through a cougar pretending to be a kitten. If I don't have the time to evaluate whether it's actually fitting with the permit, am I going to allow people to ram cougars through where we only should be allowing kittens?
I'll try to keep the pet analogies to a limit. Representative Lean for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question for the clarity within the division. If we don't include residential, would this unintentionally possibly allow for things like solar farms or wind farms to be able to say, well, you didn't meet my timeline and thus move ahead? Just a question.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? First time? Second time? This is on the Division 2 of the amendment. Any others for the second time? Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I would argue that this is a local control issue. I know it's sometimes hard to resist this body to inserting themselves into the affairs of our local governments, who actually do understand the issues that they have to deal with. And I think this is an example that's just a bridge too far. Ultimately, it's not going to help move development in a manner that it's probably just going to tie us up in court. And I just think there's better ways to do this. Thank you on and for the amendment.
Thank you, members. Any others for their first time? Going to second time now. Anybody speak second time? All right, going back to Representative Filer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think a lot of the folks, you guys are bringing really good concerns about kittens and cougars and all that stuff. But to kind of answer some of those questions, like when we talk about timelines for commercial, with this amendment, just making it residential, but the timelines for commercial, we got to remember that those timelines to build a project with a large, say a large commercial or a large industrial build, that's usually years. And that company is held accountable by making sure they check all their boxes with that municipality, all of them. And that's why they have multiple planning meetings and all these different things. We're talking about when they actually pull the permit. We're not talking about all the preliminary admin work that's done prior to pulling this permit. We're talking about this is all done. All of our checks and balances are complete. Planning department says, submit your building permit. You submit it. That's what we're talking about here. So to say that they can't meet these timelines, most likely they've been working with this contractor, this outfit for a long time prior to. I'm just going to use one of my own, experiences. I've had one that took 2 years, one project, and I met with that municipality 15 to 20 different times to make sure that I had my checks and balances in a row, so I didn't get hit or slowed up on my project. And that's what we do even as homeowners, as contractors, or anything we do. When we submit that permit, after meeting with those municipalities, we submit that permit, we know we're good. We know we're good because we've worked with them. We're talking about afterwards. What goes on after they say, go ahead and submit that permit? This is what this bill is pertaining to. It's saying, hey, we did our due diligence. We've done everything you have asked us to do, and sometimes. We're just asking you to not hold us up. We're asking you to allow us to do something that we've been planning and building and investing our money into without any hiccups. We're asking for the same accountability. That's all we're asking for. Mr. Speaker, and I know we're probably taking a long time on such a small bill, but the local issue came up. Is this a local issue? I bet you in about 10 different local municipalities it's an issue in the state of Wyoming. This is an issue in the state because I'm going to be honest with you too. I have built, and I have friends that have built in multiple counties in this state. Rules are different here than they are over here. Ordinances are different there than they are over there. Their planning department does things a different way over here because they got different rules than they do over there. There is nothing set in statute on how to do this in order for somebody who wants to come here and build commercial, residential, industrial, all these different things in order to improve our economy and build our economy better. And I'll be honest, in the contracting world, anybody that's ever been in the contracting world knows the biggest hangup for anybody to spend money and develop a piece of property is the municipality. It's not the cost of construction. It's not hard getting labor or a workforce. Their biggest hangup is sitting at that government municipality that has all the power and they have none. So if there is a local issue, then we know about it in your local communities. I hope you work with your county planners and stuff like that. But if not, this bill actually helps the whole state. It helps every single one of our counties that has a planning department or a municipality. It keeps everybody in line. It keeps all your builders, your homeowners, everybody knows it's the same game. There's nothing changing. It creates that equitability. We talked about wind farms. To be honest, that is going to be a conditional use. It most likely is not going to fall under here because if you look at most of your zoning and stuff in your counties and municipalities, I'm pretty sure wind farm is a conditional use, not just a permittable use. Permittable uses and conditional uses are two different things, folks. Permittable uses, kittens and puppies. Conditional uses, I'm going to change it from bears to sharks. Okay? So, but you're talking about two different things. And if it's a conditional use, which is something that is not permittable, which is the bears and your sharks, they got to go through that process. You might have to change zoning. You might have to put out a lot more public comment. There's a lot more scrutiny involved and all those different things. We're just talking about a guy that wants to change his cabinet shop into a welding shop. That's all we're doing here. Or somebody that has a commercial building and wants to have a little tiny laundromat to make some money for their family. That's what we're talking about here. With that, Mr. Speaker, on and against Division 2, sir.
Members, you are voting on Division 2 of Second Reading Amendment Number 2 to House Bill 202. Yeah, that's all twos. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Division 2 has not been adopted. House Bill 202 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 245.
House Bill 245, sponsored by Representative Knapp. Pen and paper ballots, an act relating to elections.
We have amendments. First amendment comes from Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning.
Good morning. Please proceed.
I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 245 and ask for your support. So first off, this amendment does not change that the bill makes paper ballots the default method. But what the amendment does do is to consider our constituents' choice in the method that they use to vote. So constituent A loves paper ballots. Best voting experience ever. Great, they have access to that. Constituent B is like, man, I really like the machine because it helps and tells me when I'm overvoting. I can make that correction and not have that part of the ballot thrown out. Or maybe I really am into barcodes. I don't know, but great, that's their choice. So the amendment removes persons with disabilities on page 2, line 6. So instead of just allowing persons with disabilities the access to the machines, we're replacing that with electors who choose to use them. So we're giving our electors the freedom to choose how they want to vote, how they want to cast their ballot. So please consider that all of our constituents should have equal access to their preferred method of voting, whatever method makes them the most happy. This amendment does that, still preserves the default being paper, but maintains the option for access to voting with a machine. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Members for your first time. First time. Representative Chairman Knapp, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So as stated, the act is to use paper and pen ballots as the default method. We do allow for the touchscreens to be in place as an exception. And that exception is for the HAVA or anybody with a disability that would need to use that machine because, again, election laws and election integrity involves a person being allowed to vote, exercising their right to vote, but also allows for chain of custody and for auditing purposes. So that's what the bill's for. The amendment deals with what I would construe as convenience. You know, we must get away from the mindset that voting in our culture is not only a right, but it's a responsibility to vote. It should not be born out of convenience, but a duty as a citizen. This amendment exemplifies the catering to voting apathy rather than the integrity of our elections. Pen and paper ballots moves us to a more uniform, more secure vote, but allows for the option of those who need to use a screen. So that machine will be available not out of convenience, but out of necessity. So I would speak against this amendment.
Any other members for their first time? Representative Provenza, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Guess to translate what I just heard, you have the right to vote, but only if you do it the way I want you to. Vote aye for the amendment.
Any other members for their first time? Seeing none, second time. Representative Knapp, do you want a second time? Good. Representative Sherwood, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, body, thank you for your consideration on this. Currently, the exception in the bill is only for an individual with a disability. So if you have a constituent who does not have a disability or doesn't want to admit that they have a disability because they don't want to be treated different, they can't use a machine. And that may be their preferred method of voting. And I would argue, I think it's dangerous ground to acknowledge that voting is a right. It absolutely is a right. Why not make that right easy to do? Why not make that right convenient? Why not open up that right to all of our constituents equally? Thank you for your consideration.
Members, you're voting on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 245. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Chair's in doubt. All those in favor, please stand. Guess I shouldn't have been in so much doubt. Might as well follow through. Stand still. Okay, you may be seated. No, you don't have to. It was the vocal minority that did not pass. 16 actually are in favor, so thank you, members. Next amendment for our consideration, number 2 to 245, Representative Yin, please.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 245 and ask for your favorable consideration. So members, we had this discussion during Committee of the Whole where it is putting a financial burden on one particular county who will have to replace, especially without the last amendment, basically all of their machines except for the ones that they'll have for the exception. And so I don't want as a state for us to burden the county fiscally for the decisions that we make. So this is a way to make sure that that county has access to the machines without targeting specifically their taxpayers. That we're saying as a state, it is our responsibility to help you with the actions that we've decided. And so with that, I ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Knapp, for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. This amendment, while offering up the funds to do so is unnecessary. That particular office that is in charge of overseeing elections already has an elections readiness account that these funds can come out of and pay for this. I'm agnostic to this amendment. You can vote more money to them if you want to, but they do have an account that would take care of this.
Any other members for their first time? First time? Second time. Back to the bringer, Representative Yin.
So, Mr. Speaker, thank you. So the number I put in here is not one that I pulled out of thin air. It's one that I asked that association that represents the folks that run your elections, what it would take. And rather than drain other funds, we should make the statement that we are going to help you do the things that we're telling you to do.
Thank you, Representative. Members, you are voting on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 245. Okay. Chief Clerk, this is a roll call, so Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown Gary? Brown Landon? Byron? Campbell Elisa? Campbell Kevin? Chestick? Clouston? Connolly? Davis? Eklund? Erickson? Filer? Geringer? Guggenmoss? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Heft? Jarvis? Johnson? Kelly? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Lean? Locke? Lucas? McCann? Nicholas? Ottman? Pendergraft? Posey? Provenza? Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams. Repeat. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 7 aye, 54 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have chosen not to adopt second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 245. Next amendment for our consideration, let's see. There's another one coming, I understand. It's a late request, so we're going to hold. It's going to be a little few minutes. You got something you want to go? Cue the music. You ready? No. I was ready for the dance. That's what I thought you were going to start something there. Okay, we're just waiting for an amendment, ladies and gentlemen, so get ready and keep refreshing your screens, and we will have it up briefly. Be a great opportunity for a privilege of the floor. Does anybody need to be recognizing some folks that they have forgotten, or I don't want people to leave here upset that they didn't get to talk to their representative from the floor. This would be a wonderful time. And no, Representative Pendergraft, we're not asking for a joke, so just. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege?
Please.
You can cut me off at any time, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks
but
for the warning.
The way this story started, as stories often do, is when I was out riding with another buckaroo. We'd rode 1,000,000 miles together, always side by side. He'd seen me throw my pretty loop, and I'd watched him make some rides. But for this here story that I'm telling, you can wipe the record clean, because there's never been a tougher bronc or a twister quite as mean as those two in the sagebrush on a burning August day when Scotty tried to ride Old Blue into God's eternal day. Now, Scotty, he was forked, a legend all around, and Blue, he was an outlaw who could really quit the ground. So when they got together, it was bound to cause a scene. I'd been counting on watching and hearing that Blue horse scream. Now, Blue, he was the second horse that Scotty caught that day, and we'd been kind of talking how he just might get away without having to make a bronc ride, as the day was mighty hot, and Blue just might not pitch too bad when he broke into a trot. So, that's not good. Looks like we're getting some paperwork.
You're doing great, buddy. I'm telling you, hang in there. Don't give up. It's all right. Gather it up. Get back on. Keep going.
Old Blue, he's acting nervous, blowing rollers at the sparrows. He's kicking quite a little at Scotty's tapaderos. I step aboard my pony, I point her out the gate. Scotty follows right behind me, not wanting to be late. We shuffle walk a quarter mile and get Old Blue untracked. Then I break into a long trot. Heck yeah, I'm looking back. About then, I hear a ruckus, makes me turn plumb full around just in time to see that big blue horse really quit the ground. Old Scotty jerks his quirt down, makes her sing a little. Old Blue, he's getting higher as he's breaking in the middle. They're stirring up a dust storm like a feller seldom sees. Blue's taking big old spinning jumps a little higher than most trees. Now this is getting western. I spur up to catch the wreck. Scotty's quirting up a lather which is dripping off Blue's neck. I notice all this spinning round has caused a little wind, and I see a little whirlwind starting up by Blue's hind end. And as they spun, I watched it grow into a full-blown storm until a dusty funnel cloud around the two had formed. It lifted them up off the ground with Blue still bucking tough, bucking rough, Scotty quirting and spurring, hanging pretty tough. I came to the conclusion, I took it kind of hard. I better take a hand in this or I'm going to lose my part. Because Blue, he's not giving in, and Scotty's riding high, and they're really getting up there, way up there in the sky. So I reach for my pistola. I begin to blaze away, thinking maybe I can slow Blue down and save my friend today. Well, down they come, tapaderos over tea kettle. They're both laying mighty flat when the dust had settled, and that storm, it blew off across the sage and left us mighty still. Blue choked, Scotty coughed, they come alive, although it took some will, and to this day I do not know what made that bronc ride end. Did I stun that big blue horse, or shoot the quirt out of Scotty's hand? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams. For that waxing eloquent dissertation, we thank you very much. I do believe now we have an amendment. Amendment number 3 to House Bill 245. Representative Wiley, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to move second reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 245. Body, I would like you to consider this amendment. We are a great representation of a democratic republic. And there's no better way to reach our folks at home than to let our clerks distribute this, let them choose. Let's do home rule, let's bring some local control. And I believe there's no better way than to let our folks at home make this decision, and it'll be a great representation of all of our constituents back home. Thank you. Favorable consideration, vote aye.
Thank you, Representative. Any members for their first time on House Bill 245, second reading amendment number 3? Representative Knapp, please.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I don't want to reiterate this too many times, but this bill basically puts into effect those 3 things that we believe in elections. Number 1, the right to vote. It gives that ability to every person that walks in the door. Number 2, a chain of custody. To be able to take your reading that the machine spits out and be able to say, for certain, this is who I voted for. Not a barcode that you have to decipher, but you can't because we don't have source coding for it. It's proprietary with the machine. That is not chain of custody. The ability to audit is the 3rd one. To take that receipt that you get out of the machine and be able to audit that ballot. That is not possible with this type of device. So again, I would ask you to resist the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Larson, JT, for your first time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, managing our elections across our state is a tall ask for our clerks, and they do it very well. And I just think that in order for them to have the flexibility needed to operate our elections, we should be giving them that in statute, not restricting them on what they can and cannot do. And I think that this amendment helps the bill because it gives that flexibility. So that way that if there's specific constituents that the clerks need to represent in their district, they're able to represent them fairly. We're tying the hands once again of our local electeds, where I think we all believe that local control is of the utmost importance to maintain. And so I just stand on and in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? First time on the amendment? Seeing none, second time on the amendment? Representative Knapp, second time.
Mr. Speaker, just to the last representative that spoke, I come from local. I used to be a county commissioner for 12 years. I understand and work with clerks for years and years and years and understand their role in elections. They're elected and they should have that autonomy. However, we need to have uniform statutes for our elections in order to maintain those 3 aspects that I've spoke of. So we don't give clerks carte blanche ways to run an election just because they're an elected official. Their responsibility by statute is to follow statute. And so we give them some guidelines so that we have uniformity, we have a chain of custody, and we have audit capability. That's it. Many clerks do things very differently, but in this instances, we do have to have some uniformity across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Wiley, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I just want to reiterate, I appreciate the efforts of the good chairman that just spoke before me, and I hope we can change his mind. I doubt it, but I hope. We're trying. I agree, and I've sat on that good committee for the last couple of years, and I heard hours and hours of testimony. Where there could be a problem, I don't think we have found it yet. I think we're kind of looking for a boogeyman, and we're kicking over stones. For the problems that we have right now and the hill that we're facing for the long climb ahead, I don't believe that this is necessary. Our clerks at home are elected by the folks at home. If they don't like how they do it, the system will switch how they're doing it. There is already statute in place to where we're giving them guidelines. They follow it. We have great elections in the state of Wyoming. We have 0 instances statewide of where we've had mass cases of fraud. On 4.
Members, you're voting on second reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 245. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Chairs in doubt. All those in favor, please stand. You may be seated. Those opposed, please stand. Just in case we're missing some members here. You may be seated. The amendment has not been adopted, 36 to 23. Members, House Bill 245 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration will be House Bill 273. We have amendments. Representative Provenza.
House Bill 273, sponsored by Representative Rodriguez-Williams. Wyoming Pregnancy Centers, Autonomy and Rights, an act relating to public health and safety.
Representative Provenza, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 273 for your favorable consideration. This amendment is essentially a cleanup in our statutes, as you've seen hundreds of them now at this point in session. We don't often start our bills with findings that don't mean anything. So the section 1 is just talks about legislative findings. It's kind of our feelings about an issue. Oftentimes you'll see something like that in a resolution. What I'm proposing is to remove that language just for, good legislative process. What we don't want is to continue to have this sort of, these findings in every bill. It takes up staff time. It uses a lot of paper. It ends up in our white books, not necessarily our green books because it's not law. So this amendment would delete section 1. And again, that doesn't do anything to what the bill does. It doesn't harm or help the bill. It just removes the language that isn't going into law. We're legislators. I think our job is to write law and policy, which is fine. We don't write just our ideas about things. We have plenty of other platforms for that. So I would ask for your favorable consideration in removing section 1 of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any members for the first time? Representative Rodriguez-Williams for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and opposed to the amendment, like to keep the bill whole. I guess one thing we've learned over the years is that when it comes to legislation, definitions and findings are actually appreciated by the courts. And so I would push back against wasting ink and staff time and so forth, because there are bills that we've read and gone through that contain a lot more words and a lot more pages than this one. So on and against.
Any other members for their first time? First time? Members? No members. First time. Second time. Back to the bringer, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just vote aye and being conservative with how we use our resources. So aye, thank you.
Members, you're voting on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 275. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for our consideration to House Bill 273. Representative Provenza, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 273 for your favorable consideration. Members, this bill, what this amendment does is just requires that the information provided by these nonprofits is accurate. It doesn't require that information be shared that they may not want to share, but it needs to be accurate. The reason that I bring this to you is because these pregnancy resource centers are nonprofits. We don't protect any nonprofit in our statutes the way that we are protecting this one. I would say that, oftentimes the people that go into these centers are looking for help, and they need help, and I believe that these centers do provide some of that, right? But there's no, in protecting them from giving them immunity, we should also have some requirements that what they provide is good information. It also requires that they have to follow ethics of protecting the people that they're serving. I would bring your attention to page 11, lines when we're inserting 15 and 16. Typically, when we grant immunity, it's for government entities. So what this bill is doing is giving immunity from any litigation against these companies, against this nonprofit, mind you, that is not regulated. And so this is just a simple amendment to ask for some honesty, to make sure that we're not putting pregnant women in harm's way with dishonest information. I think it's a bare minimum to ask for that, given that we are now saying that you can't sue them and that they can do no wrong. So basic requirement or basic ask for these organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kelly, for his first time, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, I'd like to ask the good bringer of the amendment, accurate according to whom? Is the state going to be deciding what is truth and what is not?
Any other representatives for their first time? Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
First for a second, Mr. Speaker.
First for your second. Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Had to adjust this a lot. On and for the amendment and against the bill, and primarily to the points that were brought. The ask is that we take a nonprofit organization and now asking or mandating the government provide protection and removing any sort of liability or and granting immunity to these nonprofit organizations. I don't think it's a sandbox the government needs to be in terms of private industry. And so at least holding them accountable to some standards. If we're going to have the government stepping in and providing that protection and immunity, seems reasonable to me. So absolutely on and in favor of the amendment and against the bill.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? Representative Thayer, for first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, on and for this amendment, my concern is, as the last good representative from the middle of the state, is this opening us up to every single nonprofit in this state, giving them immunity? I mean, let's let the ball roll. So on and for this amendment.
Any other representatives for their first time? Seeing none, second time on the amendment. Representative Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, just to piggyback from the testimony we heard from the good representative on the other side of the bighorns. The terms that are used in this amendment are vague and they're legally unenforceable. The term used in the amendment, medically accurate information, it's not defined. Who will decide what information is medically accurate? You can't subject these centers to second-guessing retroactive criticism for meeting a vague and ill-defined standard. And then looking at standards of ethics and guidelines required by other healthcare facilities, what is this referencing? Is this referencing facilities that dispatch the unborn? On and against.
Any other members for their second time? Second time, seeing none, back to the bringer. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is tied to civil law, so the people who would make decisions is a court. So if someone is given inaccurate and dishonest information about potentially their pregnancy and they suffer consequences like their unborn baby dies because they were given bad information, then they can go to the court and they can have recourse. But this bill currently says they can just do whatever they want, and they also get to sue people. They have legal remedies if they have any damage or declaratory relief, injunctive relief, and any other appropriate relief to these centers. We provide 0 nonprofits this benefit, and maybe if I want to start a different facility that does something like provide abortions, I'll call it a pregnancy resource center, and then I will have the government's protection. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please vote aye.
Thank you, representatives. Members, you're voting on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 273. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The amendment has not been adopted. Members, having been read 2 separate times, House Bill 273, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. All right. That completes third reading regular. Representative, good majority floor leader, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the third reading consent list, and it has changed if you haven't updated your computer in the past hour. There are 6 bills on there: House Bill 83, House Bill 85, House Bill 181, House Bill 235, House Joint Resolution 1, and House Joint Resolution 3.
Mr. Speaker, point of order, just need to move those bills for the consent list, please.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I move the third reading consent list of those bills that I've enumerated.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Would anyone like to remove any of those bills from the consent list? Any bills? Seeing none, will the reading clerk read the bills on the consent list?
House Bill 83, sponsored by Representative Pendergraft. Child custody, sex offense conviction presumption, an act relating to domestic relations being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 85, sponsored by Appropriations. Local approval for simulcasting, an act relating to parimutuel wagering being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 181, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd. Funeral contracts, investments, and bonding requirements, an act relating to insurance being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 235, sponsored by Representative Andrew, Career Technical Education, Equipment and Supplies, an act relating to public school finance, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Joint Resolution 1, sponsored by Capital Finance, amending Wyoming's Act of Admissions for Earning, a joint resolution requesting Congress to introduce a bill and enact a law to amend the Wyoming's Act of Admission to authorize the expenditure of earnings for the support of the common schools in Wyoming, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Joint Resolution 3, sponsored by Representative Sherwood, support for rural schools, a joint resolution in support of rural schools in Wyoming, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the House? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Brady. Bratton. Brown Gary. Brown Landon. Byron. Campbell Elisa. Campbell Kevin. Chestick. Clouston. Connolly. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Filer. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins excused. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strzok. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for House Bill 83, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for House Bill 85, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for House Bill 181, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for House Bill 235, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for House Joint 1, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for House Joint 3, are there any changes? Webb, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes. Heiner, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Bear, aye to no. Further changes? Weber, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 57 aye, 4 no, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bills 83, 85, 181, 235, and House Joint Resolution 1 and House Joint Resolution number 3 have passed the House. On to bills on third reading, regular. First bill for our consideration, House Bill 4. Chief.
House Bill 4, sponsored by Travel, snowmobile registration and user fees, an act relating to motor vehicles being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments, one amendment at this point. Representative Byron, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill number 4 and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, what this does, it was a little cleanup amendment brought to me by a fellow to the east of here that sits in the body, to the west of here, excuse me, and then and a concern from one of our colleagues where they grow wheat. And basically what it does is just clarify some of these antique discussions we've had. It's really 2 word changes, and then the meat of it is changing that antique definition from 30 to 20. Pretty simple. Ask for your favorable consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Any members for their first time? Representative Rodriguez-Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a brief question for the bringer of the amendment. There's a large population, or large group in the state that snowmobile, and I'm just curious if you had the support of them with the amendment.
Representative Haroldson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So a part of this conversation actually started out of our area because one of the struggles that we're having is areas that are dedicated snowmobiling areas like over in Albany County or up into our basin country. These individuals, they'll ride these machines daily, every single weekend. But you get over into my country and it's 2 hours of driving, and the concern that I had is that an individual contacted me and said, hey, I've been collecting old machines. I'm getting them fixed so my kids and I can go up snowmobiling. It's going to cost me $250 to take my kids up there, and we usually go once, maybe twice a year. And that's not counting the food, the fuel. He goes, honestly, we'll just get rid of them at that point because it's not worth it. We don't get enough snow in our area to ride them. We have to haul them over the mountain and past the university to make that reality. And so we had the conversation, 30 years and then look at 20 years, that 10-year swath picks up a lot of these machines that we're talking about. Now, let's face it, the avid sledders, they're gonna go out and their socks cost more than $50. I mean, let's face it, their goggles cost way more than $50. They're like, whatever, yeah, we'll put it on. If they give us some more trails and take care of our trails better, we're all over it. So the industry is 100% behind this. They have no issue with it. But what we're trying to do is open up the net and grab that group of people that it might be the dad that has 5 machines that just wants to let his kids go up and experience the mountain. Maybe one of them will fall in love with the sport and go buy a $20,000 machine and put a $50 tag on it every single year, because that's what it is. But this is a situation where, hey, you got some older machines, you want to go up and experience it with your family, grab a Christmas tree, do something of that nature. You're going to pay $25. It'll go on that machine. And the truth is that machine may last another 10 years or it might last 10 miles, because that's welcome to 2 strokes, right? And we can not saddle them up to having to pay this. We still get to take care of our trails like we want. And this 20 to 30 year change doesn't grab that many more machines. The reality is the people who are sledding seriously wouldn't touch a 20-year machine. That's the reality of it. So on and for the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for the first time? First time? Second time? Seeing none, back to the bringer, Representative Byron. Chairman Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer the question from my colleague on the other side of the large national park, if you have seen your emails and checked them, we do get hundreds of thousands, it seems like. But yes, the industry and the associations have been very positive. So thank you for bringing up that point. They traveled far and wide to testify on this through the interim. They continued to send you guys some emails and certainly spoke via Zoom, and we're quite excited for this. The industry's asking for it. And I would certainly ask for your favorable consideration.
Members, you're being asked to vote on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill number 4. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. House Bill number 4 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Brady, Bratton, Brown, Gary, Brown, Landon, Byron, Campbell, Elisa, Campbell, Kevin, Chestick, Clauston, Connolly, Davis, Eklund, Erickson, Feiler, Geringer, Guggenmoss, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Heft, Jarvis, Johnson, Kelly, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Lean, Locke, Lucas, McCann, Nicholas, Ottman, Pendergraft, Posey, Provenza, Riggins excused, Rodriguez Williams, Schmid, Sherwood, Singh, Smith, Storr, Strock, repeat, Stivar, Tarver, Thayer, Washut, Wasserberger, Webb, Weber, Worf, Williams, Winter, Wiley, Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Harshman, excused to aye. Further changes? Allemand, aye to no. Further changes? Brady, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 54 aye, 7 no, 1 excused.
House Bill number 4, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill number 4 has passed the House. Next bill ahead for us, and it has amendments, is House Bill 123.
House Bill 123, sponsored by Representative Nyman. Adverse possession, property tax payment defense, an act relating to civil procedure, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Okay, and we have amendments. Sorry, I'm getting it pulled up to see who the amendments are by. Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 123 and ask for your favorable consideration. So, ladies and gentlemen, just to understand what this amendment is and the next amendment, I just want to give a little more background about what adverse possession is. So we've had adverse possession in Wyoming since 1886. So we had it in territorial days. And the law that we passed in the territorial legislature in 1886 is identical to the current law. In other words, it's never been amended. And adverse possession has been litigated fairly regularly for the last 150 years. I mean, it's one of those issues with landowners. There just tends to be issues that arise that come to the fore. And so if you go into in your green books and you look at the history, it's got about 5 pages of different of cases of various disputes involving adverse possession. So what is adverse possession? Essentially, it's a mechanism to obtain ownership or title by use and occupancy So, for example, if you live on you homesteaded on a chunk of land and you lived there 10 years, and it just so happens that that was owned by somebody else, but you fenced it off and you were open and notorious and you used it and you produced the property, then after 10 years, you have the right to file an adverse possession claim and make that property yours. And then the court, if you meet all the elements of adverse possession, then you become the titled owner to that property. So it's a mechanism to clear title, to resolve disputes on who owns property, so that the property gets its maximum use. So it's actually being used. All 50 states in the United States have adverse possession laws, every single one of them. Our courts have, on numerous occasions, addressed whether or not property taxes are relevant in an adverse possession claim. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. It depends on the facts, because what's really important about adverse possession claims, they are incredibly fact-intensive. So it really depends on the facts of the case on whether or not someone has a claim to someone else's property. But literally, this mechanism and the adverse possession laws, the earliest one ever found was in 2000 BC in Rome, Roman Empire. There was a law in the books of adverse possession. Then it became part of the English common law. And so back into the 900s and into the 1200s, there are different ways that adverse possession then became part of the common law structure. And it traveled over with our good friends when we came to the United States, and they evolved over time now to be primarily statutory. In many states, it's constitutional, where there is the right to adverse possession. So it's a dedicated and long-term process of obtaining property, basically under the old adage, ownership or possession is 9/10 of the law. I mean, that's kind of the underlying concept. If you don't assert your right of ownership, and it forces the owner of the law diligence to make sure that someone doesn't come and squat on his property and you don't remove him, you acquiesce into it. So there's lots of legal issues that have evolved over time, and at the end of the day, our jurisprudence and the American law has found this to be a good thing, not a bad thing. Although it's never easy, really, to do adverse possession because it requires strict construction of the law. So you have to meet every single element to the T, and by clear and convincing evidence, by the way, because it's unique, because it is a taking of someone else's property. So we built up these rules around it so that it's only done in the proper circumstances. So now I'm going back to the amendment. So the amendment basically says if someone brings an adverse claim against your property or a person's property, say a person who has lived 10 years on this property, he's built a home on it, and he built a driveway on it, and he's lived there, and he brings the claim. But it comes to be that, and the proof shows he actually was only there 9.5 years, but he's been there 9.5 years. Under this language, if he brings a lawsuit against the deeded owner, he has to pay attorney's fees and costs if he loses the case. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to another concept in law, and that's called, it has to do with attorney's fees and costs, and there's what we call the American rule. The American rule is, in all instances, unless otherwise stated by statute or by law, that the opponents in a lawsuit pay their own attorney's fees and costs. So why is that? It's been our founding fathers' belief, and in the law of the land, and this is the law in every state, for other than specific exemptions or exceptions, that we encourage people to go to the courts to resolve their difficulties. And if you think you have a valid and honest claim, then you have the right to go to that court, and you should not be inhibited by it because of the possibility that you're going to have to pay the other side's attorney's fees. That's just the law of our land. It's the law of Wyoming, and it encourages people to go to the courts, to adjudicate, and to have access to the courts to fight for a just cause that you sincerely believe in. What this amendment does is just the opposite of the American rule. It infers that for some reason, if you bring an adverse possession claim and you honestly believe that you can win and your attorney believes you can win, and you fight the good fight, but if you lose, you've got to pay for the other side. And I would just respectfully submit, ladies and gentlemen, that that's not the American rule, and there's no rational basis to have that rule here. You know, we live in America where you can go to the courts, and if there's a rational basis of bringing a litigation, you should have that right to do it. And you shouldn't be prevented or hesitant in doing it because you're afraid that you might have to pay someone else's attorney's fees and costs. And so on and against the amendment, and I stand for any questions.
We are on amendment number 1 to House Bill 123, discussing it. Anyone for their first time? Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Appreciate the bringing of the amendment. I mean, it helps to create this discussion, and it helps us to kind of navigate through this. To me, when I look at this and the experience that I had in the particular situation that I described here the other evening, asserting a right of ownership is paying your taxes, in my mind. The land that you're talking about here has been described. It is in the assessor's office. That is land that you purchased. You have your deed on it. You've been paying your taxes consistently, which would say that the county identifies that as your property and has been charging you accordingly. You've been paying your taxes accordingly based on the description of your property. That is yours. Now, whether or not it's fenced into the neighbor's property or something else like that, adverse possession, even when you look into it, and I actually gave some literature to somebody that was talking about this, it comes up in the fact that it's available because the promotion of proper use of your property. If you're not properly using it or engaging in it, and then that was in the old law, was that it provided for adverse possession. Someone else would take it and put it to good use. But in the situation that we face today is that we've got into a point where when we start talking about the legal aspects of the costs of being able to defend your property, the situation that I saw was there seemed to be no discussion on whether or not it was who owned the property. It's just that, hey, you know what, I think I could do this, because it had been, I mean, multiple decades those fences had been there. And so that's what posed the question was, well, I've been using it, and you've never said nothing about it, and we've never come up with any kind of an agreement on a lease fee or anything like that. It even went back to the point where they had timbered the land, and the gentleman that actually owned the land had gotten the check from the timber. The old slash piles were sitting there. But he still brought the point up. He says, you know what? It's fenced into me. I might just start this. And that's the catalyst in this for me, is that if asserting a right of ownership is not done by paying the property taxes on that property, which would say that you've been charged by the county because you're identified as the owner, I don't know what else you could do to properly provide that information. And if somebody sees that, and they find that out, and they know that this is the described property that is owned and been paid property taxes on by that person, if you're going to go ahead and start down this road and say, no, it's not yours, I'm going to move legally to take advantage of this, and I'm going to try to take it from you, to me, that should be an all stop. Whoa, when you find that out, you shouldn't have to be challenged with the idea, now I'm going to have to hire an attorney to protect property that I've been paying property taxes on, even though it's not fenced into my own property, quote unquote. And again, when you look in areas like mine up there, natural barriers and things like that, rim rock, rough country, trying to fence on that, you can do it now, but years ago it didn't used to be. So the other issue is we've got folks that are moving into these areas, and they have a substantial amount of dollars, just a fact. And a lot of these folks that are adjoining landowners that maybe have this land don't have those kind of resources. So it can put them in a bad way if they build to them and say, you know what, I'm just going to take it because I know you can't pay enough for attorney's fees to fight it. So what I'm trying to do with this piece of legislation is to provide protection for those folks that own that property, that have paid for that property continually, yearly, through their assessment, through their taxes, and prove that they should not have to fight to protect their own property if somebody sees fit to say, hey, you know what? I'd like to use those acres, I've had them for 40 years, and I think I'll just take them. And if they go and attack that person, and to me, it's an attack because I saw it in the face of the man that was dealing with it. He's like, no, I'm gonna have to hire a lawyer to fight this. And I don't know about you guys, but lawyers are not cheap. And all the heartache and the mental strain and the financial burden that creates, I just, ladies and gentlemen, I believe it is unnecessary and it's uncalled for. And that protection of that paying those property taxes is just a good, clear, easy way of saying, if you come after me and you lose, you should pay this because you initiated it. I certainly didn't ask for it. So why should I have to pay that? So on and against the amendment.
We are on amendment number 1 to 123, first time. Representative Chestik.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I am on and in favor of this amendment. What this amendment does is it deletes a prior amendment that was inserted to the committee, the standing committee. And the standing committee basically is trying to overturn the American rule on attorney's fees, and that is exactly correct. And we do have statutes that reverse the American rule, and you can do that by statute. There's a number of statutes that do that. They're mostly in the area where there is a weaker person who is being sued by a stronger person, and in order to even the playing field as a disincentive for stronger persons to take advantage of weaker persons, there is a right for attorney's fees. Civil rights litigation, for example, is a good example of where the American rule has been reversed by statute. I don't see that situation here. I don't think that two property owners or two claimants to property, one is necessarily stronger than the other, so I don't see that imperative to change the American rule. What the amendment that was inserted does, it seems to say that the plaintiff in an adverse possession claim is presumed wrong. And I don't think that's a fair assumption to make. I think there are situations where the title is unclear and you do need to have some litigation to clear it up. The language that this amendment would delete talks about, provides proof of proper title. Well, what is proof of proper title? That's a debatable term. If there's a contest between two claimants of the property, I just don't see the need for reversing the American rule, and I would therefore stand in favor of the amendment, which would return the situation back to the American rule where everybody pays their own lawyers.
Thank you. Okay, we're on our first time. First time. Thank you very much. Man, why do I do this? Thank you very much, Representative Eklund. Why don't you go for your first time?
So, thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. So I guess what I'm trying to sort out is if we pass your amendment to the bringer of the amendment, if we pass that amendment, then does it fix the bill? Because I'm thinking there's more that you're going to want to correct, and I don't know much about the one system, American from Wyoming, but I think we're trying to do what's best for Wyoming. So help me with that. Will this amendment help to fix the bill, and do you have any ways of getting this bill to pass? Because we have to have this conversation. Things are changing fast in Wyoming.
Thank you. Anyone else for their first time? First time going to the second time to the sponsor.
And so a little bit of confusion. So we're on the amendment, and the amendment came out of the committee. And that amendment, all it does is say that if you bring an adverse claim in court, so you're the plaintiff, and you lose, then you have to pay the attorney's fees of the defendant, of the other party. That's contrary to the American rule, and what it also does, it suggests that the adverse possession law is working an injury to whoever the defendant is, and you want to penalize him. How can you penalize him when the law of the land right now is you can do this? In fact, it's encouraged because that's what adverse possession is. And the state of Wyoming has encouraged it. It's been on our books since 1886. And it's in every other state in the United States. But we want to change it and make it a penalty if you bring an adverse claim and you lose. So let's not talk about whether adverse possession is right or wrong. This is just has to do with who should pay the bill, or should our courts be open, or should we dissuade someone from bringing a claim? Because if you lose, you have to pay attorney's fees. So all this amendment does is remove the committee amendment that says that attorney's fees will be paid if you lose your case that you brought under statute. How do you find out if you're right or you're wrong unless you've read the law, you've been living on this property for 20 years, openly and notoriously, but if you lose for some other reason, because there's multiple elements you have to prove, and if you miss one, then you got to pay the other attorney's fees. And the point is that we live in our jurisprudence, in our democracy, we solve disputes by going to court. And no one likes to pay attorney's fees. And so typically, most of these kind of issues get resolved between the landowners because they don't want to go to court. But when you do, you're encouraged to do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. But you don't have to pay the attorney's fees. So I'm just asking that this attorney's fees clause be removed. So in favor of the amendment.
Okay, folks, we are on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 123. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. The noes have it. Division being called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to 123, please rise. I'm down. Yep, 22. Yep. You may be seated. All those opposed, please stand. More than 22. That amendment has failed. On to the next amendment, Representative Nicholas.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would move third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 123 and ask for your favorable consideration, and I will remove it at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a delete of the enacting clause of this bill brought by our good speaker. And now, I've probably done 8 or 10 different adverse possession cases in my law practice through the years, and I've been on both sides of the fence. Always representing landowners, but typically it's a rancher versus a rancher. But it also can happen on a lot in town if someone's garage got built over on your property line and it's been there a long time. And so there's all kinds of different scenarios, and it also applies to real personal property, by the way, in some instances, and to easements. So it's a very complicated, a very fact-intensive law, the adverse possession. And the concept that is in this bill on property taxes, this says that if you are paying property taxes on the property, then, and it's filed with the clerk and in the county assessor's office, then the essentially, you can't assert a claim for adverse possession. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what that does, it literally guts our law of adverse possession. So what you're doing is you're saying there is no adverse possession. That's what this amendment will do in many, many instances. Because, I'll just give you an examples. There's one of the cases like I was reading last night. This gentleman had homesteaded, basically built a home on a property back in 1984 on a large ranch. The ranch was over 15,000 acres, and frankly, the prior owner knew about it, didn't do anything about it, didn't fight it, but then he sold the ranch, and then the new ranch owner didn't know about it for 10 years, 12 years. And when he finally found out about it, so this person had been living on the property for 35 years, had his home there, had developed it, was haying the property. He said, "Get off my ranch. I bought it." And the guy said, "No, I don't think so. I think I've lived here and I deserve this." Well, by definition, when you do that, when you are on property through adverse possession, you don't pay property taxes. And your county assessor probably won't let you pay because you're not the record owner. Even though it's not the assessor's job to determine really who owns what or where. They don't go out and look at the deeds. They don't, now we've got this modern apparatus where you can actually go in on your computer and you can see the lines. But deeds are written in lots of different ways, and sometimes they're on fence lines, sometimes they're deeds, fences of convenience. There's all these different things that happen and that occur. So in other words, lots of people are paying property taxes on things that they don't own, or they're not paying property taxes because depending on where the fences are. And once again, courts have addressed this on numerous occasions in Wyoming. And what they say, what the current law says is whether or not you paid property taxes is one element of demonstrating your proof of ownership. But you have to remember, adverse possession means you're on property that is owned by somebody else at one point in time. So that's the whole point of adverse possession. By saying that if you say carte blanche, if you've got paying property taxes, you could be a landlord, lives in Ireland and own it for 200 years and come back up. As long as you've been paying the property taxes, there could be a whole town there. And then what does that mean? He can, in 200 years, he can bring an action and say, "Okay, everyone, I've been paying the taxes here, move the town." Well, we don't, that's why we have adverse possession. So in instances like that, for an absentee ranch owner, if you don't diligently protect your property and remove people that have moved onto your property, then you're penalized for it. At the end of the day, you can lose your rights to your deeded properties. But then there's lots of other issues that happen where the same thing happens. A perfect example was with our family ranch. When my folks bought the ranch, it was separated with our neighbors with a fence line, and everyone just kind of presumed that fence line was the boundary line. After owning it for 20 years, there was a survey for our adjacent property owner after that ranch sold, and they came in and moved the fence about 120 feet onto our property. And they said, this is actually the boundary line. And we said, "Oh, no, it's not." So we had to go to court in that instance, we had been paying property taxes for his property, theoretically. So he wasn't paying for it. And so you've got, when you use taxes in your tax rolls as a mechanism to prevent adverse possession, it turns the adverse possession law on its head, literally. And there's all types of issues. One of the cases that I did had to do when the boundary line was the center of a river. Well, that river was a meandering river, right? And so there was literally 45 or 50 acres had moved from one property owner to the other property. Well, who's paying taxes on that? Nobody really knows who's paying property taxes on that, but their property taxes didn't change. And so the person that lost part of the ground because of the meandering river says, I've been paying property taxes on the other side. And the court said, well, no, that's not really, that's not relevant in this instance because the law is the center of the river. And if the river moves, the property boundary moves. So there are, and you know, there are boundary fences, that's a whole law in and of itself, but it's tied intimately into adverse possession and because you have to fence out to have adverse possession. You have to have fences. You have to put up a sign essentially that says no trespassing, and the owner has to come in and who actually has deeded title, and you say, get the hell off my property, and you got your shotgun in your hand, and you know, so it's open and notorious is what it's required to do. And so, but I don't know the facts of, I know some of, all we know is the description that the good speaker explained of what he found. But my guess is there's a whole bunch of additional facts that we don't know. Who built the fence? How long was the fence there? How was it put to use? Did the prior landowner or the lessee acquiesce to it? Because if you acquiesce to it, then it's not hostile. It's not open and notorious, so there is no claim. There's all kinds of different things that you'd have to know in order to know whether or not there was a true wrong in that instance. Without knowing the facts, we don't know. But what we do know is the law's been on the books for 130 years, and it has served us well, and it hasn't, no one's tried to change it since then, or been able to change it, because it's a good law. Is this a bad result, that example? Sure sounds like it to me, but I don't know the facts. And we can't presume, based upon a short story description of the circumstances, if it was bad or not bad. But does that justify changing the statute that we put in 1886? Adverse possession is a good thing. So on in favor of my amendment. And so with that, I withdraw my amendment.
We gotta, we'll hold you on that for 1 second.
After we speak.
Representative Chestek, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. And I've been going back and forth on this bill since it was introduced, and thank you to the sponsors for bringing this. It's an interesting problem, and I've been debating which way I should vote on this. And I have been persuaded, I think, by the good bringer of this amendment that I probably should vote no on the bill. And the argument that convinced me to vote no is the valid point that the assessor it's not the assessor's job to determine title. And so if paying taxes on the property is conclusive of ownership, that's giving the assessor power they don't really have and shouldn't have. Because they're not doing any title searches, they're not doing any kind of investigation to find out who owns the property. So for that reason alone, I think I have to be a no vote on this bill. I don't think that's going to be a problem for the situation that prompted this. Again, we don't have the full story about what happened to the rancher that is the genesis of this bill. But I think that the owner of the ranch that prompted this whole idea probably has a good defense if an adverse possession action is brought against that rancher. He's got a good defense, it sounds like, from what little I know. And I have spoken with the sponsor of the bill, the good speaker, about this. And that is because of one of the elements of adverse possession, and I did some research on this yesterday to make sure it was still accurate. One of the elements that hasn't even been mentioned yet on the floor, but is still part of the law, is that the possession has to be under claim of right or color of title. Those are requirements of adverse possession, and I'm not sure that the person who put the fence up had any claim of right. There is no such thing as grand theft land. Because there is no And there's probably no claim of right there. I think your rancher friend is going to probably win a lawsuit if one is brought, but I don't think we need to change the statute and create a presumption of payment of taxes equals ownership, because I don't think that's there's some potential unintended consequences there that we need to be very wary of. Thank you.
Speaker Nyman. Oh, Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So my guess is in the cases we're talking about, the previous owners had a claim of right to build those fences or build those buildings. I'm hoping people will listen to this in the state of Wyoming and get your property lines as right as you can. The bringer of this amendment spoke of a set of buildings that were on it, and I can't imagine that the owner of that ranch was going to pay property taxes if it wasn't a member of his family. So I think that's probably what happened. Changed hands. They didn't get things right before they changed hands. And all of this is kind of a mess. If you don't have those property lines correct when you sell the place. I know the circumstances that our good speaker had spoke of. I know the circumstances on him. Those are all over the state of Wyoming. And somehow I'd love to resolve it without court cases, but the more I listen to it, the more I think maybe we're all protected by this adverse possession law. But I'm probably going to be a no vote on the well, it's going to be pulled, but this amendment and go ahead and go with the bill, see if we can push it along a little further and try to resolve some huge problems in the state.
Thank you very much. Representative Wally.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. There's been a lot of discussion, and I really do appreciate the background given on adverse possession. It's a very unique area of the law, but it's also very well developed. My concern is some tinkering here that will have unintended consequences. I was against, for example, the amendment about attorney's fees because for this just simple reason. The only way to clear a title in an adverse possession situation or potential situation is to go to court. That is the avenue of relief, and to put penalties on that for people who are just trying to clear up title issues, I just don't think it's a good policy move. But I think this is well developed. The court has very strict requirements that they have to meet because it's always been viewed as a taking of a kind. And again, I don't think that assessors having a role in this is a good idea. But I believe that, again, in Wyoming, I believe, and that the evidence of paying taxes is a factor. It is a factor. To me, this seems to put that at a higher level than a factor. It gives a kind of a priority that is a huge policy decision in an area that is very complicated and has many aspects. So I just, again, against the bill, I would have liked to have taken those attorney's fees out because it would have helped a little bit. But I think this is an area that we should be very careful to tread into because it's very well settled law, and we will likely complicate this process more than we're going to help it. So for maybe the help we get, we also get a load of trouble. So again, on and against the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker Nyman.
This is awesome. I hate to drag this on any longer, but this is a very important issue, and I appreciate the debate. I appreciate the bringer bringing this because now we have the opportunity to really discuss this. I guess I've got a few points that were brought up on that I think really actually can confirm what the reasoning behind this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a question of, is your property yours? It truly is. It's not the assessor that is deciding whether or not you own the property. It's the description that you paid for when you bought your property. That's what you're being charged on. My deed has a very clear description of every corner, everything, all the way around where that all lays. And then that is transferred to the assessor, and that assessor charges me based on the property that I purchased. An interesting point that the good bringer of the amendment talked about is that when there was a change of ownership in a piece of property that was next to them, part of that other gentleman's land was fenced in to their property. Immediately, the new owner, who I would assume just paid cash money for that property, said, I'd like to put the fence on the property line. Not sure about that. Well, then immediately the first thought into my mind is, well, who's going to reimburse him for property he just paid for? Because he probably just paid for property based on a deed of actual acres. So does he own that land? Why would they charge him for something that he didn't actually own? Are fences actually figured out on where they stand as opposed to the property description in your deed? And this was the clearest, easiest way that I could figure out to be able to provide the protection to the actual owner of the property and protecting them from the potential loss of that property because the assessor has the description of the land. Whether or not the fences are on those descripted lines doesn't matter. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your land. It's my land. And there has to be some means that I can use to go back to and say, I've been being charged for this property based on the description. I'm not being charged or assessed based on my fence lines, because heavens knows those fence lines can be everywhere. I've seen it. We do it right now. I can show you on my place. I mean, it's where it's convenient, not where it's on the line. And so that's where I think we open ourselves up to this opportunity to be able to provide for litigation and for all these things. And what I'm trying to do is tamp down on that opening of that door to say, hey, maybe I ought to make a run at just getting that land from you. And if there's not any more clear evidence than saying, if I just paid for a piece of land and I go in and I say, good neighbor, in order to get along, good fences, good property lines make good neighbors. Good fences make good neighbors. I'd really like, being I just paid for this property and I'm going to be charged and assessed of tax on this property, I'd like to be able to use my property. So I'd like to put a fence on the line. No, because the fence is over here and we've had that for decades. We're gonna have to go to court on this chunk here. So does this gentleman, how does that work? I mean, can you just own that land, or does he get a refund from the other gentleman person that he bought the land from? And do you pay for the other property from that way? I mean, to me, it just opens a can of worms that are just unbelievable. This just seems, and maybe in my very naive way of looking at this, I bought it, I paid for it, I own it, I want to be able to have it. And I don't want to have to be under the potential threat of somebody that comes in and says, well, hey, it's been fenced into my place for a lot of years, I'm just going to take it. I don't know. I just don't believe that's the way we do things. And I think when you start looking at the idea of do you own it or do you not own it? This way, it was the cleanest, easiest way that I could find to prove that you own that property because the county you live in has been charging you for it, for the use of it. Quite frankly, that's what property taxes are. So then we go to the question, do you actually own your land? Now here's another part of this. Now think, if I quit paying those property taxes, who's going to take that land? They'll take it from me, not the other guy that's got it fenced into him. So that's why I come up with this. That's why I would push back against that. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a way that we can provide some security, peace of mind, of knowing that if you own and are paying for a described piece of property, that it's yours until you make a deal with whoever wants to take that property to work something out to allow them to have it. If they want to, take it or sue it for it or whatever, then let the courts work that out. But if somebody just wants to start this thing and see how far they can push you, knowing all the well that you've been paying for this in good standing and it's yours, I don't know why the good representative here should have to pay for that when everybody knew from the beginning he's been paying for that and it's his. Now he's got to defend it. So I'd like to see those kind of things be off of people's minds. On and against the amendment for the bill.
Minority Floor Leader Yin.
Mr. Speaker Pro Temp, so thinking on this bill a lot, I mean, I guess the question for me has always been, why does adverse possession exist at all? So maybe if we talk about why we're tinkering with it, we need to understand why it exists. I'm not sure, not a historian, but I feel like if I was in our forefathers' shoes and we were having a debate on putting in adverse possession at all, I think my belief would be that land is a fixed resource. So the state's interest is making sure that land is actually used and not abandoned. We have abandonment of water rights, right? So if you don't use your water for a certain amount of time, it gets abandoned because water is a fixed resource. We want to make sure it gets used. So then the question becomes, okay, so we have this, I guess, policy of allowing adverse possession because we have land that has been abandoned. They're paying property taxes, but they're not on it, right? They're not protecting their property right because they're not there knowing that someone else is using it, which is the only way adverse possession can actually exist. So then why would we allow someone to protect their property rights with only property tax payments if they're not necessarily there actually knowing that someone is using their land without them knowing, right? What is the purpose of putting this factor over all other factors? We've heard that it's one factor of many, and I appreciate that courts take all of that into balance, but I don't know, and I still need to be convinced on why an owner who may not be actually on the land checking their property rights should have it solely protected just because they pay their property taxes. So still need to be convinced on that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you. Anyone else for their first time? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I voted for the amendment from the committee and I voted for the bill, and I'm listening to debate. And I can't help but think, now that we've made it so that if someone starts an adverse possession and the defendant has shown that information that they can't be sued, now I guess something I didn't think about and that I'm concerned about is, does that mean that we're hindering our neighbors from potentially solving these problems beforehand? Because now I'm showing you that this is, I'm showing you evidence. Is that going to then be used to force me to pay for litigation if I disagree? So I guess, and maybe one of the good lawyers, forgive me, I'm just a hillbilly in a suit today, can tell me what that impact will be in terms of trying to settle disputes beforehand. Not in legalese, but just common sense, nuts and bolts. Does this mean that people are not going to be as willing to talk to each other about where their property lines are? Because now, if it does have to go to court, that is evidence against forcing me to pay, even though maybe I did have I had respectable intentions. Thank you.
Anyone else for their first time? For their first time, on to our second time. Representative Chestick, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. To respond to the last speaker, I think if this bill is defeated, nothing changes. We have the same law of adverse possession we always did have. And it's worked well for many, many years, since prior to statehood even. And we have not loaded the deck in favor of one piece of evidence. We have to look at the whole picture. And as I said, I still think that the ranch where this issue prompted the bill might have a good result, depending on the evidence. So voting against the bill does not mean that the person who pays the property tax has any disadvantage. They still have the advantage of saying, I'm paying the property tax. And that's going to be some evidence in the adverse possession case that comes before them. And it really doesn't change anything.
Thank you. Anyone else for their second time? Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. I guess what I'm looking at in this, is this an opportunity for people to, a descriptive term that I've used most of my life, you better have your ducks in a row before you start down this road. This is simply saying that you better know that you're gonna do what you're gonna do and not just threaten this stuff, because, ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest. I mean, a threat of legal, attempt to take something like this, that's an expense. If somebody starts something and then you've got to defend yourself, if you can do it, if you're sued, you can, what do they say? Anyone who defends himself as a fool for a lawyer or something like that. I've heard that before. Anyway, to me, what I'm trying to do is I'm actually trying to offer the opportunity to avoid that kind of a problem. Do your homework, make sure you know where it is. This is to protect the person that owns the property, that has the description of the property and has been charged for that description. It's a simple, straightforward way of saying, yep, that verifies that you own it. And to the idea that, in this country where I'm talking about up there, it hasn't been grazed. It's not like as if there's a house hidden back in the brush up there somewhere that nobody knows about them coming in from the back way, and they've set up camp up in there, and because you're not really an active owner participant in your ranch, that you're not back out there finding out that somebody's come in and set up shop on you, and now all of a sudden that they can take that piece of property. I'm talking about land that is just not been in use, but you own and have been charged for it, but you haven't had the use of it. For whatever reason, if the opportunity or the ranches have changed, you never change the fences. Let's say, for an example, here's a great example, I think. Okay, you've got 3 different landowners, and one guy comes in and leases all 3 pieces. And then there's a center chunk there that the fences are not on the line, but it didn't matter for those 3 decades, 4 decades, because one guy was leasing all of it. So nobody worried about moving the fences. Leave everything the way it is. He's leasing all of it. Why would we care? Well, then all of a sudden, the guy in the middle ranch decides he needs a little bit more for his lease, and the guy says, no, I don't think I'm going to do it anymore. So I can't lease that. Well, it didn't matter as long as I was leasing all those ranches, but now all of a sudden there's somebody in the middle here that suddenly wants to go a different direction, and the guy says, well, I'd like to put my property fence on the property lines. Well, wait a minute, it's been there for 45, 50 years, and you've never said a word about it. Everything's just been fine. Is that right? Should he have to get ready and start paying lawyers to get his own property back because it's been 50 years leased to the same ranch and nobody's moved a fence? And nobody's debated it, nobody's fussed? Because, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what happened in this situation. There were 3 separate properties that were leased. The middle property was the one I ended up leasing. Fences were not on the line, not even remotely. And the gentleman wanted to put it on the line, and the neighbor said, I don't know about that. Does he own it or not? Should he have the right to defend it? Should he have the right not to have to go and pay attorneys to own his own property and put a fence on the line, or risk the threat of adverse possession? This was simply a means of being able to say, yep, you own it if you've been paying taxes in good faith and good form. And so, anyway, we don't want to beat this to death. Up or down, ladies and gentlemen, right? Adverse possession law has been here forever. But I do have to say this. Times have changed. And in my country, it's not the same people that used to be able to go and sit down over a cup of coffee and a handshake and say, yeah, we'll leave the fence up on the ridge if I can have part of that little bottom there, and we'll use the rim rock as the fence, and we'll just kind of leave things the way they are. Now we've got people that come in with a substantial amount of money, and they'll say, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to punch a hole through here, and we're going to build fence and rock and over rim rock with no amount of money that it costs, because I just paid $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 an acre for it. It's mine, and you're not going to get it. And oh, by the way, that chunk that's fenced into us down below that rim rock, I think I might just see if we can take that too. And those old folks maybe potentially there can't fight that. I just want them to have a defense, and I want to have them to be able to chance to avoid that conflict. And so times are changing, ladies and gentlemen. Land's a big issue, and I believe this provides some real protection for private property rights and landowners. On and against the amendment for the bill.
Representative Wally.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Expressed and implied in the process of adverse possession are obligations of the owner, the one who has title, who has asserted ownership, has that deed. There are obligations, and obligations that imply that you have to be diligent to see and to, when you observe people possessing your land, that you push back. And that's kind of the process. So what we're talking, and I have great sympathy for this situation. Adverse possession was never easy, and that's how it developed under the law, and with some very strict requirements. And each one of those requirements, in a way, reflects an obligation of the landowner to protect their land. And what this does is ends up, again, elevating this idea of paying property taxes as the protection. That's your protection. We're going to give them that protection, which throws the whole thing in a little bit of chaos, as I said before. You're elevating to a priority when there are many factors, and all of them are important. And again, the system is, though, that there has to be an arbiter. There has to be someone who goes through all of the elements of an adverse possession and make decisions. And it's already been pointed out that that is a strictly construed process, and the evidence has to be clear for anyone to gain land through adverse possession. It's not an easy process, not an easy at all. But to basically have the landowner only have to pay taxes ignores all these other elements of taking care of your own land, being aware of where fences are, and being proactive, because that's actually the intent in adverse possession. They're looking for is that this landowner did things to demonstrate that they were in no way giving up any title to their land, any use of their land. And so again, I'm for the amendment and against the bill, because I believe that to just take this piece out is going to create more chaos than you realize into the process, and isn't going to simplify things. And it's very possible that courts might not even recognize it, because the law is all well developed in this area. And it's not clear to me how a court would factor this in, considering all of the case law that we have for generations about how we approach this issue. And so again, I just caution the body, and I would say on the amendment and against the bill. Thank you.
Anyone else for their second time? Second time to the sponsor.
Thank you. Thank you for the good conversation, ladies and gentlemen. It's really interesting, because what the description that the good speaker just talked about, having a land, three pieces of land locked, and having a fence that was not apparently on the actual boundary, but it was, so that example is actually another reason why the language that he has does not fix the problem, as I envision it. And ladies and gentlemen, there's the abilities to survey are quite a bit different now than they were 20 years ago, and especially 120 years ago. Lots of surveys and property descriptions are just incorrect. I mean, we just had our place resurveyed 10 years ago. It borders the national fence, the national forest, and we ended up gaining about 160 acres of basically what was where the national folks put the forest fence, and we just assumed it was the boundary. But what we found that they used, that some of the markers were wrong or had been moved, so they had to re-put in the markers, and it went good to us. But the point is that fences, and there's a whole different law of fences as boundary fences versus property descriptions. Lots of property descriptions are wrong, are off a little bit, or their markings are wrong, or the, old property descriptions would be the tree down the road or next to the rock fence, literally, or by the red barn. I mean, that's just what they did. But then once those descriptions are there, they're there forever because they're on file. But when you go in and you start having a dispute, and you've got two different surveyors that come in, and even they'll argue about where the property line is. I mean, because they are incredibly factually intensive. And so I would respectfully suggest that this language does not really fix the problem that the good speaker is trying to fix. It just compounds it. And at best, it just substitutes one problem for the other. And so, and the case law basically is pretty clear in Wyoming. It says that in Wyoming, statutes does not require taxes in order to establish adverse possession, as do some states. All others facts or circumstances of the case are on all the facts in front of it, including whether taxes are paid or not. So that's just what the law is, and so I would just trying to think of it's never good to fight the speaker, because particularly when he's got more guys on his side than on my side. But literally, I mean, the adverse possession is a good law. It's withstood since 1886 in Wyoming, and this really turns it on its head, and it's going to cause a lot more problems than it's going to create. And with that, I would respectfully withdraw my amendment.
Thank you very much. House Bill 123 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Brady. 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 Bratton. Brown Gary. Brown Landon. Byron. Campbell Elisa. Campbell Kevin. Chestick. Clouston. Connolly. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Filer. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haraldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins excused. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strzok. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 40 aye, 21 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 123 having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 123 has passed the House. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I move that the House stand in recess until 3 p.m.
You have heard the motion. Committee announcements. Vice Chair Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Your committee number 2, House Appropriations, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess. We will discuss House Bill 190, bond election language process, House Bill 140, Continuity of Permitting Act, House Bill 336, waiver of parental rights, financial responsibility, and House Bill 337, prohibiting foreign funding of ballot measures.
Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 1 will meet tomorrow morning at 7:30. Here are 3 bills. House Bill 111 will work House Bill 194. Public testimony is closed on that bill. And if time permits, House Bill 260.
Chairman Brown.
Is that Brown or Byron?
Brown.
Brown, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaker Pro Tem. Your committee number 8 will be meeting in 15 minutes to discuss 2 bills, House Bill 341 and House Bill 263.
Chairman Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, Cultural Resources, will meet at 1:10. Committee members, 1:10 we will begin. Hear House Bill 106, 110, 002, and as time permits, 107, 95, and 151.
Chairman Knapp.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. Your Corporations Committee, number 7, will meet tomorrow at noon recess in E005 to hear House Bill 223, House Bill 278, House Bill 332, and House Bill 68.
Chairman Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 5, Agriculture, will meet today after adjournment in room 3 downstairs to discuss House Bill 331 and House Bill 150. And we'll talk about those in reverse order, 150 first and then 331.
Chairman Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Your committee number 9 will meet tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. in room 5, and we'll hear House Bill 318, Maintenance of Voter Lists, and House Bill 321, Election Judge Selections.
Thank you. Any others? Seeing none, you've heard the majority floor leader's motion. All in favor, say aye. No? Motion carries. The House will stand in recess until 3 p.m. Also remember, the food will be cleaned up by the time you're done with committee. So if you are going to committee, go get your lunch now and eat it during committee meetings.